I'm very pleased to welcome Volodymyr Groysman. He's the Prime Minister of Ukraine. Great to have you with us, Prime Minister. Now, this is your first visit to Berlin as Prime Minister, and you've come at a very difficult time. The EU is going through a tough time with the Brexit. How do you view these developments?
Це насправді мій перший візит як прем'єр-міністра. Він відбувається в Європі, саме в Німеччині.
As the Prime Minister in Europe, to Germany, our strategic partner, Ukraine has outlined its path, and I understand that it's a difficult time for the EU, for the unity, but I'm deeply convinced that political leaders of the European Union will find respective and correct decisions to protect the unity of the European Union. Ukraine sees its future in the European Union. We are continuing a difficult task and path of defending our independence and our move to the European Union.
Now, of course, people would like to ask, will the Ukraine still like to join the European Union, given all what some people see as chaos, because Ukraine is not an EU member as yet?
Ukraine has an association agreement with the European Union. Ukraine's aspirations, especially after the Revolution of Dignity that took place on the Ukrainian Maidan, people testified their wish, confirmed their wish, they want to live in a free and free country governed by the supremacy of law. Now we're transforming the country. We're trying to fight corruption, to create a system of justice in our country, to revive the economic growth. We have a lot of tasks we need to resolve, and we have managed to do something over the last 2 years, especially with the help of Germany in particular. This path is not very simple because we have an aggression from the Russian Federation today, and in fact, our territories, we have Russian Federation troops in our territories, and they're supporting the rebels. But I'd like to say we're going to demonstrate our success. Ukrainians deserve that. It's a very complex path, but we'll be successful.
So you have a lot on your agenda. You're the youngest Prime Minister the country's ever had, 16th Prime Minister of Ukraine. You've come with a very good reputation of turning around the city where you were mayor a few years ago. But the challenges at the national level are much bigger. How confident are you you'll make progress in, say, the key priority which you've discussed, corruption?
As a matter of fact, we need to do a lot of transformations, and in particular, I always say that we have 3 fundamental enemies. That's the Russian attacks and Russian military aggression, corruption, and populism. The populism that sometimes dominates in our country, and these 3 things can steal our future away from us. I'd like to reassure you that I came to this position, and in the power structures, in the authorities, I'd like to have a success for Ukraine. We do indeed a lot of challenges. Over the last 25 years, the system took roots. But the changes that we've performed so far, we started the judicial reform, created the institution to fight corruption, and in fact, they are now making quality steps. So these are independent institutions that could not exist and could not even be thought about by any authorities. Now, we're supporting a lot of structural reforms, and these structural reforms will bring about its result, will diminish the impact of oligarchs, any corruption on simple people's life. This is our task, and I'm very consistent and insistent pursuing this task with the government, with the coalition. It's important for us not only to take positions, but it's important for us to change the country. It's a historical chance that actually is the chance for our generation, befallen our generation.
Now, Prime Minister Groysman, many see you as a protege of President Petro Poroshenko. Reform activists are a bit skeptical about you and say you have the support of oligarch parties. Do you think this compromises or undermines your political position in the country?
I am
what I am. I have my own history, and as you said, I was mayor for 8 years. I was elected twice, and after that I worked as vice premier and then the head of the Supreme Rada, Verkhovna Rada. Now I'm Prime Minister. I feel only dependent on my own views and the interests of the state, and therefore anything else doesn't matter and doesn't have any significance. I think in Ukraine we have this moment when the president, the parliament, the government must be united. working together with the civic society in order to make sure the reforms are held very efficiently to the maximum. We have a lot of steps that have been already made on this path over the last 2 years. We have to accelerate the reforms, and we have to revive the economic growth. And I'd like to say that this is something where we see some positive growth in the economy, 1.5% of GDP. We have to create a normal climate for investments to arrive in Ukraine. Yesterday I had meetings with the German business, which means they remarked that there was an improvement in the situation in Ukraine, and it is important for us not to betray the ideals, the principles and the views that we have. Therefore, there will be no dependence on anyone.
Now, you've mentioned Russian aggression several times. Now, you talk about, what's happening in eastern Ukraine. Russia blames you, you blame Russia. Given this mutual blame game, how does one break the deadlock and make progress for peace there?
As far as the Russian aggression is concerned,
це величезний виклик не тільки для України, а й виклик для всього цивілізованого світу. Я вважаю, що на сході країни сьогодні є протистояння не внутрішнього конфликту, а зовнішньої агресії Російської Федерації, яка абсолютно порушує міжнародне право, і Україна є жертвою цієї агресії.
Ukraine is the victim of this aggression. On the eastern border of Ukraine, there's a defense of European democratic values. We can't afford, we cannot allow that in the 21st century the borders of a sovereign country would be violated brutally, that the choice for European integration would be neglected. A lot of people suffered a lot over the Revolution of Dignity. A lot of people were fighting for freedom. A lot of people in Ukraine were fighting to become part of the European family. And it's important now that the whole world would band together to and let the aggressor understand that aggression would not be allowed. We have to get back to respect for international law. Russia must move its rebels and troops from the Ukrainian territory. We have to reintegrate these territories into Ukraine. These are the Ukrainian territories that are captives of Russia and rebels, and Russia supports these rebels. And we want to make sure that we can achieve peace on this continent. It's a very important role that the world countries can play in this process. I'd like to thank the Federal Chancellor and Germany in particular for huge support.
Now, of course, the EU has extended sanctions on Russia for another 6 months, but there are divisions appearing within the EU whether these sanctions are not hurting the EU as well as Russia. What is your stand? Do you think sanctions should continue?
Sanctions were introduced as a punishment for the aggressors' neglect of the international law and starting military hostilities on the territory of the sovereign country and killing my fellow citizens. And that was the punishment. The sanctions could be reviewed or softened only when the aggressor drops the plans of suppressing European values, freedom and freedom of choice of sovereign countries. Then we could review the sanctions. I think the tactics of Russia is about to exhaust democratic countries and to force them, especially through the Russian propaganda, to take their attention away from the problems that they created in the east of Ukraine. That cannot be allowed. This is the question of our own security. This is a question of security for other countries. Either we move the aggressor back to their borders and force them to respect the sovereign states, or the question will be, who's next? We had Moldova, we had Georgia, now it's Ukraine, and it's a huge challenge for the European Union and the world.
But of course, the people in eastern Ukraine feel culturally and economically close to Russia to some extent. Very briefly, Prime Minister Groysman, you were in Germany. What kind of support are you expecting from Germany?
Люди ні в якому разі не потурались в Україні і жодних тисків.
There was no pressure, there was no restriction of views or outlooks in Ukraine. There was never an internal conflict, a domestic conflict in Ukraine. That's important to understand. Everything that happened in 2014 happened because Russia intervened, made an intervention into Crimea and the east. And you saw it live on TV. And so when Ukrainian Crimea was resort place. Now, the Ukrainian Crimea is a military base that is a threat to the rest of the world. It's very important we keep the unity. And the Germany's position stays steadfast. Respect for law, respect for sovereign borders and countries, and that's fundamental. Respect for the international law. And Germany is principled in its position and steadfast in it. We feel the support from Germany. We feel the leadership of Germany in the Normandy format, and that tells us that in this world has the values worth fighting for.
Right. Prime Minister Volodymyr Groysman, thank you very much for sharing your thoughts with us on DW.